Hey, welcome back to the Style Sessions. My name's Roger Mittag. I'll be your host for the Style Sessions, and today we're going to take a look at a unique style of beer that is really hard to define, and it means something different to every different country. Sometimes we call these things European lagers. In some cases, who knows, domestic beers, but it really changes. So today we're looking at something called the standard lager. And a standard lager, in my terms, is a beer that is renowned to be a part of a country's origins. So in Mexico, it might be very light-tasting lagers like Corona or Sol, and we know those things now as cervezas. So today we're going to take a look at this thing called a standard lager. Now I'm going to explore, I guess, one of my favorite beers, and that is because this is a beer that my dad drank. And I have a lot of respect for my dad, and he left Germany in the early 1950s, emigrated to Canada, made a life for himself and his family over here. And I always respect the fact that my dad was a relatively simple man that didn't need a lot of things, but what he did love was German beers. And this is the beer that he fell in love with later in his life, and it's called Henninger. And Henninger is, in German terms, a normalis or a lager. And sometimes you call these beers lagers because they don't fit into the Helles style and they don't fit into the Pilsner style. They sort of fit in the middle somewhere. So we're going to open up Henninger and I'm going to pour it. The glass I'm pouring it into is called a Vertige. It's very tall. It's got a slight stem on the bottom, and I want a glass like this because standard lagers typically are one of the least complex beers that you're going to find that you're going to enjoy. I've got a good amount of foam on this. You can see how beautiful it is. We've got that nice light golden pale color to it. Big, rich, dense white foam. But standard lagers are meant to be thirst quenching, easy to drink. They don't have a lot of intensity to them. There's not a ton of hop bitterness to them. The malt profile is slightly less. And really, these standard lagers gave us what we're seeing in North America as our standard beers. Things like Budweiser and Coors and Labatt Blue and Molson Canadian. These are all what I would refer to as standard lagers that a lot of people grow up drinking and understand that they just meet their needs. They're just wonderful beers that are really well made, and they're thirst quenching and easy and refreshing. So with beers like this, what you get is probably some muted characteristics all the way through. So if you're getting a little bit of bread, cool. You're not going to get much. It's probably going to be toast, bread crush. You might get a bit of that grassiness in there, and pretty much just bread on the flavor profiles. There's not usually a ton of fruit in here, except for some of the domestic beers that we're seeing, like Budweiser and Coors. You tend to get a little bit of banana, apple, pineapple notes. A lot of those characteristics are coming from the yeast, but this particular one, Henninger, which comes from Frankfurt, doesn't really have a lot of yeast profile to it. It really is very Germanic in its way. So for me, the reason that these are so important is because my belief is that when brewers came from Central Europe, especially Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, and they came to North America and they emigrated to Canada and the United States, I think they found very quickly that they couldn't make beers with the same recipes that they were developing back in their homeland. And we have to understand that a lot of the beers that were being consumed back in Europe in the late 1800s, early 1900s were most likely Pilsners and Helleses. And that's because people enjoyed them. They could see right through them. They were nice and clear. They were very thirst quenching, easy to drink, and they were sweeping across the world. And this is really the style that dominates the world. And whether you want to look at it as brands like Heineken or Stella Artois, that's really what these are. They're standard lagers, and they are really easy to drink. Now, the biggest difference between a standard lager that may be done in Europe, or what in Germany they call it a normalis beer, which is a normal beer, or just a lager, is that in Europe, it's most likely that these are all brewed with 100% malt, whereas in Canada and in the United States, we have a tendency to want to use an alternative source to 100% malt, which tends to add a little bit more body and mouthfeel. And so we use things like corn and rice. Now, I'm not against using corn and rice. I think what it does is it lightens the body, lightens the flavor, and allows you to consume to your heart's content. Other people view that as sort of sacrilege, but I think times have changed. I think a lot of craft brewers are playing around with corn and rice now because they understand that having a beer with lighter body and lighter taste leads to a little better consumption pattern. So really, really simple beers, really easy to drink. Have fun with them. You know, they're not meant to be complex. They're meant to be really easy to drink. And the next time we meet, we're going to take a look at another blonde beer that has sort of set the world on its ear and was one of the very first geographical protections in Europe, and that is the Kolsch. So next time we see each other, if you want, I'll be pouring Gaffel, which is available in Ontario. It should be available in a lot of provinces, but grab yourself a Kolsch while you're enjoying these sessions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. Cheers.